Let's try this. Okay, Mark. What is up, Generals? We are back with Ultimate General Civil War. We are playing the Union Major General Campaign. We are working our way towards the Battle of Cold Mountain, and we are prepared the army for the Battle of Brock Road. I don't really know if it's a battle, I'm more of a skirmish, but regardless, the army has been prepared. Generally speaking, all the units are either at the 1,500 man cap or they are have been raised to the point that an additional soldier or rookie would cost them the perk. Generally speaking, I am beginning to phase the Springfield Model 1855 out in favor of later weapons. Additionally, I'll be also working on phasing the Enfield out as well. But in the Battle of Brock Road, we're allowed to bring one full core and then one half core, give or take. So we'll be bringing second and third core, predominantly because I want to get Grant some experience. I want to see if I can't get him to pick up his third star before Cold Mountain. Unlikely, possibly at Cold Mountain. We'll see. It does occur to me that we're heading towards the end of the campaign, and as a result, I want to make sure that everything is ready. Additionally, before we jump into Cold Mountain, I'm going to try and maybe pick up some officers, although we have plenty of generals just sitting around playing cards, so who knows. Additionally, we can sell off some of the weapons that we know we're not going to use, but I'll be doing a lot of that off camera. For example, I know I'm not going to use the 12-pound howitzer pretty much ever. And the nice thing about having economy 10 is that you sell the weapon for the same price you would buy it for. So basically, you're good to go. And I also know I'm not going to use Napoleon, so bingo, bango, off we go. Just as an example. So let's jump into it. So Brock Road leads us towards the Battle of Cold Harbor, and then we're closing on the end here. We're not that far off. So Confederate Army is, call it 50, somewhere in there. The training is fairly high at, call it 59, and the armory has started to climb again a little bit, call it 55. So I should expect to see Richmonds and that kind of thing coming out of their force. However, Brock Road only involves a small portion of that, and we're going to go ahead and drag 2 cores, the assaulting force, and 3 corps as support. Our force stands at 43 in change with 150 some odd guns, or 100, just shy of 150 guns, and 43 brigades. The Confederate force stands at just shy of 50,000 and just shy of 239 brigades. This tells me their brigades are likely to be larger than mine, and their gun batteries are also likely to be larger than mine. Excuse me. Do note that the majority of the first force that's coming in is infantry with a lot of cannons. It's going to be 3 batteries of 20-pound Parrotts and 2 batteries of 24-pound howitzers. And the reinforcing unit is a higher proportion of supporting arm troops. That's 5 batteries of cannon, 1 20-pound Parrott, 2 10-pound Parrott, and 2 6-inch Wyards, or 6-pound Wyards. 2 melee cav units and kind of a big brute squad. And the general battle plan is that we're going to bunker up here, attempt to take this position as such, because their objective is my flag over here. The flag that we start with is over here. We're going to have another flag that spawns Mya-ish, give or take, and there's a small spoiling force that will appear here. And so we're going to try and meet them here, or theoretically elements of the reinforcing force will push down here to replace elements of the attacking force that push into this block of terrain and then laterally shove the attacking element into the corner. Once that's wiped up, the dream is to move along here, and they'll have continued throwing themselves essentially at my defenses or the open. So as we move into the latter parts of the campaign, really every battle is functionally a grand battle. So in the interest of time, and also in the interest of keeping my commentary even remotely on track, I'm going to go ahead and turn the mic off, leading into the battle, and then when the engagement starts, as far as you're concerned, I'll speed it up a bit and do some post commentary. So with that being said, and without further ado, Fiasco signing out. I will see you, as far as you're concerned, in a few seconds. Okay, so just kind of like what we described, the opener doesn't really do as much of a lead-in as it has in previous battles. Essentially, it says, here's the Greys, fuck their shit up. So you end up dropping in with an entire corps to do stuff with, and there's a couple of different ways that you can kind of visualize the first part of this battle. So I've played this fight before, and I'm aware kind of what happens, but if you come into this blind, essentially you get a corps, and they say, hey, take this flag. And the tactical question that you're asking yourself then is, I need to attack what appears to be dug-in forces over open terrain in what could very well be a suicidal frontal attack. How do I do? And the answer is that you don't. And it's predominantly because the second part of this battle asks you to what changes the scope, basically. So the initial briefing you're given is, hey, take this flag. And the reality is that you're going to be attacked by a second. It's probably not a full corps, but like several divisions will supplement the existing force on site. So what you do here in this battle is basically you're deploying your troops now to set yourself up for success later. It's a bit gamey because we sort of know that the scenario is going to ask us to do something a bit different. But, hey, we're on Major General. Theoretically, at this point, if you're playing on MG, you've played the campaign through at least once on either Colonel or Brigadier General. So there's skirmishers deployed far front of the Confederate position. 2 north of this road, as you're seeing now, and then 1 more in the region south of this road, which is like all these corn and wheat fields. There's 1 more unit there. And so I've got my sniper skirmishers kind of trying to see if I can't eyeball them. And what I'm envisioning in terms of the broad strokes of the engagement is that the majority of my force will deploy as a bulwark in this grouping of 3 like strips of forest running along the road here that's going from the northwest to the southeast, diagonally across the screen. And this is basically the northern quadrant of where my forces are currently deployed, engaging those skirmishers. And that's just because it's directly across from their flag, and ergo it's directly across from where the majority of their forces are. And I have the impression that when the second phase of this battle kicks off, those forces transition to an offensive footing and come in for the attack. So I could launch my troops into a suicidal headlong charge against Confederate forces dug in wooded terrain over open terrain. But we've literally spent, 30, 40 some battles showing that does not work in this game, nor frankly would it work in this era. Like even outside of the game, even if you removed some of the gamey shit that we do, or the explicitly gamist tendencies that the game offers you, we don't do them. It wouldn't work in that situation either. So take a quick step back to the map. What we're doing with the southern echelon of our forces, which is to say everybody south of that other road that runs diagonally from the southwest to the northeast of the map towards my flag. Although I don't know if it's a flag right now. My camp will be a flag later, so just as a heads up to that. Where Fiasco MG is currently hanging out, that area will become a flag. So I'm posting up in this northern position because I know they're going to come to me, and because the terrain makes defending there kind of favorable. I'm posting up in this position in the south For many of the same reasons. I know they're going to come to me, and this is favorable defensive terrain, but also two other things. One, this region where I'm currently deployed also becomes a flag, and then additionally, they get some reinforcements that attack in that general direction. Again, this is where I've got good defensive terrain, and then when and if they overcommit to an attack at my front, which I will blunt, theoretically, hopefully, plot twist, I do, or spoiler alert, I do. When they launch themselves into an aggressive push up the center of the field, these troops here in the south will be able to become the core of an outflanking force to the south, and then you can see I'm doing the same thing up north. I have 4 brigades, all 1,500 strong, moving north to set up for another flank, and this is basically me just picking up a big pincher movement, however, what doesn't work out well in my favor is that at a certain juncture, when the second phase of the battle kicks off, the map changes. It expands or contracts a bit. I'm not really sure what happens. I think it contracts. But the practical portion, and I didn't know this going into the fight. I debated re-recording the episode, but whatever. It's fine. But two of these, I had the formation up to the north, deployed in a 2x2 formation, either out of range or out of sight of the Confederate artillery. So there's a unit of cannons or two dug in on their left flank, which I'm positioning 3rd Guards, 41st Infantry, the Gaines Rock Brigade, and the Iron Brigade to attack. They've got 1 or 2 batteries, I want to say 2, deployed in that position. Anywho, the second phase of the battle kicks off, and when it does, the map constricts. And so battlefield that I thought I had access to, I don't. And so the 2 units in the back, the Iron Brigade and Gaines Rock Brigade, they disappear. Now, in the upshot, they don't take any casualties in this battle. That's cool. In the downshot, my flanking force is now all of a sudden 2 brigades shy of where I wanted it to be, and I'm down the best brigade in my army, the Iron Brigade, 3 stars, and they're the only unit, to my knowledge, right now equipped with 1863s. I've got pretty good coverage of 61s, but I'm still using 55s in some brigades, Enfields in some brigades, that kind of thing. I'm pretty sure we've retired the, see? Okay, so now there's just 3 guards and 41st, and I can't find Gaines Rock or the other unit. So that's really frustrating, and it's a thing you just need to be careful of. Don't deploy north of the cornfield when you play that battle in the opening phase, or possibly wheat field. It's a golden color. And wheat, while it's growing, can be green, I think. So anywho, I get kind of frustrated, but I decide to roll on. The other part that I do is all of the artillery that comes in for 3rd Corps, and I now divert 2 of the infantry as well to go join and supplement or replace, essentially, but they're obviously lesser quality. So all of the artillery and a handful of the infantry from 3rd Corps goes up north to join that flanking force, and this is essentially my grand plan here, is to wear them down in an attack when they attack, and then pincher with elements of 3 Corps and so forth. So that's what's happening up to the far north. What's happening on the Union extreme left, and this is that grouping of troops I'm deploying to meet to the south there. Again, a bit gamey because I know some stuff's coming that I probably shouldn't know in the moment, but I do. There are 2 infantry and a cannon or something that come on in a spoiling position to my extreme left, and if you don't know about it, they basically just make a beeline for your flag, and they kind of, cause you to flip out. So I'm deploying, I think, 3rd Corps' 1st Division, which is a bunch of understrength units, to go hold that down, and then as well the cannon or the cavalry to flank and try and pick off that battery, because there's a battery of artillery and then there's a bunch of infantry. And if you can knock out the battery pretty quick, the infantry is basically without option. The only difference between what I would have done had I had my 2 brigades to attack to the left or to the north and here is I would have deployed two more of the infantry brigades from Third Corps to the south and fully blocked off the position. And then once I wiped out that infantry, I would have committed to adding those troops to support the flank attack in the south. But ultimately, it ends up working out fine. I think I take heavier casualties than ultimately I want to in some of these regions, and I'm not going to lay the blame for that entirely at the feet of the fact that I'm 2 brigades, I'm 3,000 infantrymen shy of where I should be. That definitely does cause me to take a little longer getting some of these maneuvers off the ground than I wanted to, but I can't begin to say that that's the entire, 3,000 infantry in this fight does make a difference, but it's not nearly enough of a difference that I can blame just that for some of the losses that I end up suffering. I think, well, we'll get to that when I get to it. I'm having kind of a post-battle already, which is I think ahead of where I'm at. So we launch into the second phase of the fight, and all of these Confederate units that were in a highly defensive posture transition to an offensive one. But look at the terrain. They've got they've got great cover. Every angle of approach is over open ground. And these are 3-star units, all a little over 2,000 men in strength. Attacking these would be just suicidal. Your cavalry's just shy of 1,000, which is wild because I can't ever get my cavalry over 750, and I feel like that's too big sometimes. It's just they've got a lot of things going for them defensively. So in order to make this battle work, you really have to accept that they're going to transition to the offensive, and what you need to do is make that work for you as much as possible. One of the things that's rough about this fight is when they do decide to attack. I have to give the AI credit, actually. When they do decide to attack, they really commit to it, and they send 4 or 5 brigades of infantry into a very narrow frontage. And I can't say I wasn't expecting it because, the AI is aggressive at Major General. But, man, I wasn't expecting it to be pulled off with so much proficiency. They really do a good job. So I've got to give the AI a lot of credit. When they decide to make their stand or when they decide to kind of make their push, they really do a wonderful job with it. I don't know if it's particular to this battle or just because my deployment wasn't great, or if I was spread out on a pretty narrow frontage or a wide frontage. I'm not sure, but they do a good job. They do a really good job. And I was very, very pleasantly surprised with the tenacity of the fight in this battle. But anywho, to the fight. So you see the spoiling element coming out of the Confederate their far right, my far left. It's 2 brigades, pretty good size, and a battery, also pretty good size. However, I'm deployed relatively fresh-ish infantry in spoiling positions with good cover, and they're surrounded, and they don't have anywhere to go. The only difference that would have been made by the additional 2 brigades in that position is there's a hole a little bit north of where the cavalry is, that the AI could move in, could like if they route, they could still make their way towards the flag. And so this is the attack I was talking about. This is a great attack. This is really good. They could be pushing forward with Gregg and or Harris, but they're not. And they probably should be. But my cavalry brute squad kind of gets an eye on that cannon and just hits it when the time comes. The southern attack of theirs doesn't really ever have a chance of getting off the ground. And then I realize I'm in kind of a losing position here with the guards, firing at troops in the woods, and so I back off. I back off and let my artillery get into position. All of 3 Corps' cannons are either Wyards or 10-pound Parrotts, who perform well at their at longer ranges. The 6-pound Wyards and the 10-pound Parrotts are both really great extreme range guns that you can acquire in large number, which is also quite nice. So I pull back with the guards to the far north with the explicit intention of drawing this large brigade that they're currently engaged with, whose name I can't read, out of the wood line, and then engaging it in the open with 2 brigades who are admittedly smaller than it, but, hitting it from multiple sides and blah, 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 cannon support. so forth and so on. And even though a wheat field is not exactly great cover, if we're in cover and they're in the open, it's a step in the right direction. So now I see my chance in the south. And this is what I was talking about with where 2 more brigades would help plug this hole to the north. As it stands, just some clever repositioning of my infantry, and it ends up not being a major problem. But I think 2 more brigades would have helped to end that particular engagement that much faster and allow me to commit to reallocate those forces to the flanking attack sooner, which would have, maybe accelerated the degradation of the Confederate position. But ultimately, the general battle plan ends up working out more or less the same. It's just, it would have been a little bit smoother in some parts. So the cavalry does make short work of the artillery. I can't stress this enough. If you're playing with melee cavalry, you need to group them up. You need 2 at least. Better to have 3 together. Units that are engaged in melee suffer a pretty significant debuff if they're engaged by multiple units. So a brute squad of 2 cavalry units is infinitely better than one single cavalry unit. So even if it's the same numbers, it's better to have 2 150-man cav units than it is to have 1 300-man cav unit, with the exception that 150-man cav units are incredibly fragile, and they are already very close to their shatter point, which I want to say is like 75, give or take. So be really careful with units that small. But even so, 2 units are going to have a much better impact, or much more significant immediate impact on the morale of units you are trying to engage in melee than 1 equally sized unit would. So Anderson routes, and I see the opportunity, so I charge him with the cav, with the intention explicitly of riding him down, or at the very least keeping him morale shocked for the remainder of the fight while the infantry mops up the other unit. Deployed skirmishers and mass artillery are intended to wear down the artillery of the Confederates in the north. Parrots and Wyards are not going to hit quite as hard as a 20-pound parrot would. 10 parrots are not going to hit quite as hard as a 20-pound parrot would, but they get the job done. And at extreme ranges for value, they're fine. There are better guns at it, absolutely, but again, for the value that you pay for them and the number that you can get, 10-pound parrots get the job done, as do the Wyards for a very thrifty value. Wyards are wonderful counter battery. I don't necessarily use them so much for counter infantry work. I think they're not great at it, but counter battery, they're just excellent. Okay, so we have the beginnings of our flank attack in the far south really struggles to get off the ground, and what that tells me, watching this in reverse, or watching this after the fact, I should have pulled back and waited to free up all these dudes on my far left who are busy hunting down Anderson and whatever the other unit his name is. So I should have pulled them back, and I don't, and I leave them engaged because I think, the Confederates are only so far away from breaking, and they're not. I mean, look at the forces bar at the top of the screen. We're still roughly equal, and they probably still outgun me. I make the mistake of folding my skirmishers back into my parent units to the north with the intention of launching the offensive. Mistake across the board. The skirmishers were allowing me to see their cannons and then shoot them basically without reprisal. And based on what I capture, it looks like the Confederates are using Napoleons in this fight, where the 10-pound parrot and the Wyard significantly outrange those weapons. So here we are again, kind of plugging the gap in the south, and just kind of trying to keep up. So you see, this is the Union campaign. This is the Union Army towards the end of the war, is overwhelming artillery firepower, wear them down on the defensive, and slowly get to the point where you can move into the offensive simply because you've worn down their defensive capabilities to the point that they simply can't stop you. And this army has really just grown into this wonderful war machine that can handle these kinds of tasks. The Union forces, their infantry, they're still almost universally 1-star at best. You know, like I've got a couple of 2-star. I've got a growing number of 2-star units. I've only got one 3-star unit. These are not, hyper elite forces, but we're towards the end of the major general campaign, and they're doing wonderfully, and they're inexpensive to replace, which is kind of cold to think about, but it, once you get past a certain point, they can trade pretty effectively with the Confederate Army. And do a pretty good job with it. To its credit, there's a Parrot unit. It looks like 3rd Cannon. That for the entire battle, I thought was a howitzer unit. The entire battle, I was convinced 3rd Cannon was a howitzer unit in my head. I don't know why. I was playing them like they were a howitzer unit. And the 20-pound Parrot is great at shell range, and it's like phenomenal at bolt range. And it spends the entire battle blasting away at shell and canister. And to its credit, 3rd Cannon really just kicks ass, just really takes some serious names. So misplay on my part, but it's just proof that the 20-pound Parrot's just a phenomenal gun, which of course it is. It's one of the top end guns in the game. So it's top end, or of course it's a good performer. So in the moment, as I'm playing this, my read on the situation is, I think, overly optimistic, because I think I've defined the entirety of the Confederate position, and I've found the flanks, and I know where to attack, and blah, 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 blah. And that's not the case. They're not nearly as heavily committed to their attack in the center as I think they are. They still have 2, I think, good strength brigades guarding their left flank. There's still a skirmisher unit. There's still several batteries of artillery that are now going to be getting canister shot on me in the woods. And these are Napoleons, so canister is where they do really well. Like I should be degrading these guns with Wyards and 10-pound Parrots, and I'm just not. I'm just sending in the dudes. So I just dangerously misread the tactical situation on the ground right now. And my men pay for it. I mean, some of these units, you can take a look at the green bars on the bottom of the screen. A lot of my units are fine. A lot of my units are barely touched, but a handful of them are starting to get really beat up. And these are units I can't easily afford to replace the losses in, like, for example, 3rd Guards, who have taken 300 losses. Now, 300 isn't the end of the world, but by the end of the battle, it's more like 400 or 500, and that's expensive to keep up. And I think I may let 3rd Guards degrade to a 1-star unit status. Here's another example. There's one of the infantry units in the far, far, far south of the map that is starting to have a white shield, or possibly already have a white shield, and I don't pull it back. But yeah, so 4th Infantry is not having a great day, and I don't pull it back or anything, and I should. And what's even worse is that Infantry Brigade Perrin is now pouring fire into my JF Brown unit, which is, the one casualty that I just can't begin to afford in terms of the gun, if nothing else. So I'm slowly pulling troops away from this operation on the far left. I don't know what the hell I'm thinking, but using snipers to directly engage cannons without screening units. There's a lot of things I'm not doing great right now. Well, overall, I'm happy with the battle. Overall, I'm incredibly happy with the battle. I'm ecstatic with the performance of the Union Army, especially going up against forces that so vastly out-experience it, because, again, broadly speaking, we're looking at a 1-star army against a 3-star opponent, and they're just doing great. They're just doing gangbusters. And part of its numbers, part of its artillery, part of its coordinated counter battery fires. And you see some of these artillery batteries, like when I get all of my cannons pointing at them, they just start falling apart. 2 units of Wyards and 2 units of Parrots. Admittedly, yes, that's 4 15-gun batteries or 14-gun batteries unloading on a single unit. So, of course, it's going to have some pretty heavy casualties. But even in cover like that, they start just falling to pieces real quick. And really this battle starts to turn for me when the Confederate artillery starts to fall apart, which, I mean, has been the case for basically the entire part of the late campaign. Confederate cannon has really, I think, risen to the challenge, and I have to again give the AI a lot of respect for very intelligently utilizing its troops, and despite the we'll say technical limitations associated with the fact that they have so much, they're still using Tyler Texases, and they're still using, weapons that I have long since begun to rotate out of my TO&E, and they're still using the Napoleon, for example, and I just very strongly outgun them. Despite all those factors, they're still really doing a good job, making me work for it, trying to find ways to launch the offensive. The AI is really exciting to fight against with this level of tenacity. I got straight up bored of a Union campaign at Brigadier General by Gaines Mill because I was just face rolling the Confederate Army. And here we're 3 or 4 battles away from the Battle of Richmond. We're basically done with the campaign insofar as, there's one major battle, Cold Mountain, and then Richmond, and that's it. And this 3-star army is maybe ahistorically well prepared or well equipped. Okay, fine. But they're still really making me work for it, and I think it's really fun to fight, against a competent opponent. I enjoy battles that make me work for it versus just kind of slugfests that I face roll and win. Yeah. So speaking of the battle, what's going on is the Union position has successfully caved in the Confederate flank, not without opposition, I should say. They are fighting tooth and nail for every inch of these woods, and they are doing a great job. However, in doing so, one way or the other, they're basically in this losing proposition where they need to dictate or dedicate forces to counter one of my thrusts. And there's so many at this point in time that they're running out of the ability to do it. So if they dedicate their forces to counter in one part of the line, then I attack somewhere else. And if they want to try and launch their attack towards my flag in the back right of the map, they have to do so over open terrain into waiting Union infantry who are, in pretty good cover and everything else. And there's just not really a lot of ways for them to do this. There's just not really, at this point in time, the operational position on the map is very disadvantageous for the Confederates. And obviously they're still fighting because the AI is better to die with honor or something. But yeah, their attack to my center is hopeless at this point. We've worked Malone down over here to the point that when I charge the cav in, he basically instant routes. And then I don't think he surrenders. I think, no, he just shatters. Okay. So that's that front just completely taken care of. The cavalry was a nice brute squad in this battle who only admittedly affected a small portion of the map, but still good brute squad. Yeah, and we're just degrading their front and attacking their flanks, which I know is to a lesser degree kind of like the general strategy in this game is have a good defensive front and then collapse the flank. And that's, to be quite frank, that is strategy in this era, is try and find the flank and push it through. That's how, Lee outmaneuvered and defeated Hooker's command that was twice his size at Chancellorsville. He found the flank and outmaneuvered him, despite the fact that he was outnumbered, almost 2-1. Almost. Not quite, but nearly. So yeah, it's mostly cleanup at this point. Like you can see, my second corps is quite beat up. Several of these units have taken 50% casualties or more. Some of the units, however, are fine. Some of the units are completely, not zero casualties, but a low percentage. and it's just a very uneven casualty pattern, which speaks to probably poor micro on my part, which is not a huge surprise. That said, however, the Confederate army is clearly crumbling in front of us, and there's not much left in the battle. I am going to transition to my audio here in a little bit when the time comes, but I'll cut it out before then. So I have a lot of fun in this fight. Actually, this is a really enjoyable engagement. I do enjoy these kinds of slug match sort of fights. Obviously, from an economic perspective, I don't like the prospect of replacing all the losses and all that kind of thing. But I also like when the enemy fights back and kind of reminds me that it's not just a pushover. When the enemy army, puts up a decent fight, that's when this game sings. And this is a battle where the enemy army put up a really good fight. So we're going to be heading into, I think there's one more engagement before Cold Mountain. Is that right? I think so. One more engagement before Cold Mountain. I'd like to see if I can't get Grant his 3rd star before then, but we'll see. Yeah, I'll be moving into my day of track here in a couple seconds. So hope you enjoyed the fight, and I look forward to seeing the next one. This is Fiasco, signing out. Okay, wow. So that's Brock Road. The battle was way messier than I originally intended, but the casualty figures here are pretty good. I'm actually okay with how this went. Pre-medicine 9k on the infantry is a little high for my tastes. Losing 8 guns is definitely frustrating, although I know it was in both cases in the melee over here somewhere. Casualties for the cavalry is about right, given that they ran down 2 brigades, so I'm okay with that. What I am frustrated is way up here, you saw when the map cut off, I had 4 brigades of infantry over here intending to establish my foothold with... so the intent was for all the artillery in 3 corps, which is a bunch of 10-pound ordnances or 10-pound parrots and wireds to help me put 4 brigades of infantry from the first wave, and then another 2 probably, or 3 from the second wave, and then kind of create kind of an outflanking force. And the map zoomed in and cut off 2 of them, and I just don't. So I don't want to say 2 brigades of infantry would have been that big a deal, but some of these units took a lot heavier losses than maybe I intended, and they would have likely, given the casualties. Let's take a look. A bunch of promotions. We got 1 colonel deceased and 1 star deceased. That's frustrating, but we generated a couple of generals, a couple of 2 stars. Adam Loomis, who's been with us since the very first tutorial mission, that's good. A whole bunch of colonels. So all things considered, I think this is a net gain. And as frustrating as the casualties were, especially considering that they're hyper-focused in a couple of units, I'm okay with the battle. Generally speaking, I'm pretty happy with this. Especially any battle where you get complete and total Confederate destruction is going to be one that you chalk up as a win. This is okay. This is not terrible. Let's take a look at what we captured. We covered some weapons, recovered some weapons, captured a whole bunch of CS Richmonds, which combined with our stock already will be enough to upgrade 2 brigades to full CS Richmonds, a bunch of Texai I can sell, a bunch of Napoleons I can sell. Kind of frustrated at my lack of micro with the sniper unit there, but that's pretty much on me. Recovered some guns and then some more shit cavalry weapons I'll be able to sell. I'm very interested that we're 3 or 4 battles away from being done with this whole thing, and the armory on the Confederate forces is still to the point where they're being issued 12-pound Napoleons, and we're seeing Tyler Texas in pretty large number. A Texas is something that I consider to be kind of a mild upgrade from a Mississippi 41. So it's weird. It's interesting. So yeah, Brock Road. Let's take a look at the camp and see what the damage is. It was definitely heavier casualties than I intended. I think as far as the Union Army is concerned, it's still a net gain though. So we've got just like 12,500 recruits with the additional from here, a shitload of cash, some rep points, a career point. So the rep points are going to go straight into new guns, and the career point, and tell me my logistics, probably my logistics. More ammo. You know, you see, I already had my artillery batteries kind of running out of it. So, yeah. I think this is probably enough, though. And from now, we'll start putting points into, I guess, politics, maybe? Or who knows? I've never really seen the point of racing recon above 4. Because you just need it to figure out what you're up against. And usually you can tell, you know, the rest from there. So we've got a whole bunch of great weapons now. Yeah, there's a bunch of upgrades here that can occur, which is pretty exciting. Let's go ahead and sell that all off. Sell all of that off. 240. Buy. Spencer Carbine, huh? Interesting. Interesting. So First Corps wasn't involved in that fight. U.S. Grant isn't really making. He made some headway towards his 3rd star, so he's coming along. You picked up your star. That's great. Interestingly, you didn't take any losses either. What about you? You took some. Light casualties in the cavalry. That's good. These units didn't really get hit all that hard, which isn't, you know, terribly surprising. We bump them up. And I'm actually very okay with having some of these units be really small. Let's go ahead, and you're a 2-star unit. You shouldn't be using a 55 anymore. Well, anyway, I'll clean this up off screen, and the goal will be for 55s to get replaced with Harper's Ferries, and probably also the Enfield. How's that? The Enfield has a low of 67, a fire rate of 48, and 61 is a low of 70, but slower fire rate. Okay, well, I mean, whatever. We'll figure it out. Yeah. Ah, darn, you gotta be kidding me. What about... Oh, no, that's silly. Don't... No. I'm not gonna put a 2-star general in an artillery unit just to get them their 3rd perk. They'll get it on their own pretty soon, I'm sure. It's a parrot unit. They're not typically in the weeds, so there's that. Won't be a lot before you lose the perk. Yeah. Okay, anyway, yeah, I'll be trying to replace 55s altogether. Is anything even using a Lorenz? They're good weapons, but I don't want to be using them anymore. Well, that assumes that this is accurate, which is potentially a specious assumption, you know? Richmond's, 61s, Harper's Ferries, Richmond's, James, Parrots, 55s, Harper's Ferries, 24th, Enfields. All right, well, yeah, sorry, I'll figure that out off screen. All right, so their army has been knocked down a peg. If I'm not mistaken, it was an average of 51 going into the last engagement, and now it's an average of like 45. Training is about the same or possibly even higher. I think it's a little lower. Armory, however, is about the same, so that's fine. Mule Shoe, if I'm not mistaken, the Mule Shoe is kind of a bitch. I have not played this battle. So you get 2 full core. So we'll just build up 3rd core again and see if we can't get Grant his 3rd star. And I don't know, maybe we'll use McClellan or something. But if we were to dump, we could get rough numeric parity. So I don't consider the differentiation of 16,000 to be a big enough deterrent, and everything I've heard about this particular battle is a real pain in the ass. So with that being said, this is Fiasco. I hope you guys had a great time. I haven't recorded yet the during battle commentary, so I hope that was good. And once again, I will see you guys in the next video, the Mule Shoe. This is Fiasco, having a good night, and you too, and signing out soon.